Imagine you're sitting in a quiet room in Calais. You've just met a man who seems to carry the weight of a lifetime of regret in his eyes. He's a gentleman, well-mannered and composed, but as he begins to speak, you realize he isn't just sharing stories, he is offering a confession. This is how we enter the world of Manon Lescaut. The story is told through the voice of the Chevalier Des Grieux, a man who was once a bright, virtuous student from a noble family in Picardy, but who has since been utterly dismantled by a single, overwhelming passion. The story begins in Amiens. Des Grieux is on his way to join a seminary to become a priest, a path laid out for him by his family and his own sense of duty. Then he sees her, Manon Lescaut. He doesn't just fall in love, he is struck by a force that feels more like a physical blow than a romantic sentiment. Manon is beautiful, but she is also elusive and seemingly driven by a need for pleasure that is as instinctive as it is dangerous. In that moment, Des Grieux's carefully constructed life of virtue evaporates. He abandons his studies and his family to elope with her, choosing a life of passion over a life of purpose. But passion, especially when it is as intense as theirs, is expensive. As the two move to Paris, the reality of their situation sets in. They are young and deeply in love, but they are also penniless. This is where the central tension of the book begins to pulse. Manon is not a villain in the traditional sense, but she has a profound, almost primal need for luxury and material comfort. She cannot bear the squalor of poverty. To keep them both in the lifestyle she craves, she begins to seek out wealthy protectors. Des Grieux is devastated by this. He views her actions as a betrayal of their pure love, but Manon sees it as a necessity for survival, or perhaps for the maintenance of their shared happiness. This creates a cycle that defines much of the novel. Every time they find a moment of stability, Manon's desire for luxury pulls her back toward a wealthy man, and every time she returns to Des Grieux, they are forced into a new state of poverty or crime. Des Grieux's father eventually discovers the wreckage of his son's life. He doesn't come with anger so much as a cold, devastating logic. He tries to use reason and math to dismantle Des Grieux's romantic illusions, arguing that Manon's love is merely a calculation of convenience. He tries to show his son that the love he thinks he is experiencing is actually a form of madness that will lead to total ruin. But logic has no power over Des Grieux. His obsession is absolute. Even when Des Grieux attempts to find refuge in religion, the pull of Manon is too strong. He seeks out the priesthood at Saint-Sulpice, hoping that spiritual discipline can act as a dam against his desires. But the dam breaks almost immediately. When he encounters Manon again, he falls back into a life of vice with even more desperation than before. He finds himself entangled with Lescaut, a character who serves as a predatory, mercenary guide through the underworld of Paris. Lescaut is the man who knows how to navigate the shadows, and he uses Des Grieux's desperation to his own advantage, often leading him into financial and social ruin. As the story progresses, the stakes escalate from mere poverty to actual criminality. Des Grieux becomes a man who cheats at cards and engages in violence, all to stay near Manon. The conflict moves from the private sphere of lovers into the public sphere of power and law. They catch the eye of Meme de G. M. de Brie, a powerful man who uses his immense social influence to crush them. He doesn't just want to separate the lovers, he wants to punish them. He uses his connections to have Manon imprisoned in the Magdalen, a house for fallen women. Des Grieux's attempts to rescue her are increasingly desperate and increasingly violent. He tries an armed ambush, he tries to live as a dependent of one of Manon's lovers to stay in her orbit. He descends into a life of infamy. The social structures of the time class, wealth, and the law are used as weapons against him. He is a man of natural nobility, but he finds himself powerless against the artificial power of money and political influence. The climax of their struggle in France comes when the legal machinery of the state finally intervenes. While Des Grieux manages to escape the immediate consequences of his crimes through his father's influence, Manon is sentenced to transportation. She is to be sent to the American colonies, to the wilds of Louisiana, as a punishment for her lifestyle. The final movement of the story takes us across the ocean. Des Grieux, unable to exist in a world without her, spends his remaining fortune to follow her to New Orleans. In the New World, for a brief, miraculous window of time, they find a semblance of the peace they always sought. In the isolation of the colonies, the social masks they wore in Paris fall away. Manon expresses a profound, genuine remorse for the pain she has caused. and for a moment it seems they might actually find a way to live a life of devotion and quietude. But fate, or perhaps the consequences of their past, is not finished with them. Manon falls ill and dies in Des Grieux's arms. The man who had lost everything, his family, his reputation, his morality, is left with nothing but a grave in a foreign land. Devastated, Des Grieux attempts to follow her into death, but he is stopped by the arrival of Tiberge, his old friend from his days as a student. Tiberge represents the life Des Grieux was supposed to have, a life of virtue, stability, and spiritual rectitude. The story ends with Des Grieux preparing to return to France, not as the man he was, but as a man seeking atonement, a man who has survived the fire of his own passion. When we step back from the plot, we can see why this story caused such a scandal when it was first published. It's a deeply ambiguous work. We have to ask ourselves, who is the real protagonist here, and who is the villain? Des Grieux is our narrator, which means we are seeing Manon through his eyes. He describes her as an irresistible force of nature, but he also paints her as a manipulative woman who uses her beauty to secure her comfort. Because we only see her through the lens of his obsession, it's hard to know if she is a predatory femme fatale or simply a woman trying to survive in a society where a woman's only currency is her appearance and her ability to please powerful men. There is a constant tension between romantic idealism and social reality. Des Grieux views his love as something divine, a form of spiritual ecstasy that justifies any sin. He tries to frame his obsession as a religious sacrifice, but the reader sees the reality. It's a cycle of addiction. His divine love leads to theft, violence, and social exile. The book asks us if passion is a transcendent force that elevates the human soul, or if it is a form of madness that inevitably destroys the individual. We also see a profound conflict between different types of power. There is the natural nobility of Des Grieux, his character, his education, his bloodline, and then there is the artificial, overwhelming power of wealth and social influence. In the world of the novel, the latter is far more effective. The law and the church are not just moral institutions, they are tools used by the powerful to maintain order and punish those who disrupt the social hierarchy. The repetition in the plot is also striking. The lovers keep meeting the same obstacles: a new wealthy man, a new debt, a new descent into crime. This repetition suggests that their tragedy isn't just a series of bad luck, but a fundamental part of their nature. They are caught in a loop, driven by forces they cannot control. Ultimately, the book leaves us with a sense of profound melancholy. The brief moment of domestic peace in New Orleans serves to make the final tragedy even more poignant. It suggests that peace was possible, but only in a place where the old world's rules no longer applied. And even then, death intervened. As we listen to Des Grieux's final reflections, we are left to decide for ourselves. Is he a tragic hero, a man destroyed by a love too great for this world? Or is he an unreliable narrator, a man who has spent his life making excuses for his own lack of self-control? The beauty of the story lies in its refusal to give us a simple answer. It leaves us in that quiet room in Calais, listening to a man who has lost everything, yet is still trying to find a way to live with what he has become.